Next topic for discussion is narrative discourse processing. Natural language understanding research in 1970s and early 1980s were heavily dependent on hand-coded knowledge for interpretation. Scripts were the kind of information that were used in 1970s, 77. That scripts were used in form of giving or explaining events in a sequence. For example, the famous example has been that of a restaurant, starting from a man entering the restaurant, looking for a table, searching a table, picking one table, sitting down, ordering a food, eating that food. Now, everything happens in a sequence. But that scripts were proved to be expensive and inflexible in terms of giving additional information that were required. They were replaced by new set of recording information or events in the form of narrative schema that has been replaced, that has been introduced in the place of scripts, and they were also considered to provide the script-like knowledge. Again, when we're talking about narration or narrative text, we see that events are presented in a sequence. You have the characters, you have the settings, and the information or the events are explained in the form of situations that occur, and the idea is to provide the recipient with the information that he or she can build an image of what he or she is reading or listening. Either it's a written discourse or a spoken discourse where you are listening to a narration or you are reading a narrative text. The reader or a listener forms a certain image in his or her mind based on that narration. Now, the narrative discourse processing involves story grammars, psychological validity of story grammar, and cross-cultural investigation. A story grammar is a schema in semantic memory which identifies the typical or expected arrangement of events. Arrangements of events. Now, in general, story grammar view narrative as consisting of setting, episodes, and then ending. So you have settings, episodes, and ending. Episodes are very important in the story grammar as they have characteristics, structures such as initiating event that occurs leading to some internal response on the part of the protagonist, and then final attempt towards the ending or the outcome. Now, psychological validity of the story grammar includes the episodes are processed as chunks. The important point made by Haberland is the ends of episodes require summing up processes and increase the processing load. So the summing up increases the processing load. Haberland and colleagues found that reading times were longer at the beginning and the ends of episode. Now they suggest that cognitive activities at the boundaries of the episodes were responsible for the increased reading time. So when we are looking at the psychological validity, the results that show, they looked at the increase in terms of the reading times and increase in terms of the processing load, and they have seen that the boundaries of the episodes were responsible for that. They believe that in particular beginnings, attempt, and outcome are recalled better than reaction, goals, and ending. It appears that in a free recall task, participants prefer to emphasize the objective aspect of story as opposed to the internal cognitive and emotional response they may infer from the objective events. The last point, which says cross-cultural investigation takes into account certain schemata as being something that are culturally invariant. Now, Mandler et al. Took different approach and examined this particular aspect, that whether these patterns of story recall are similar or different in different cultures. Now, they presented stories that are coherent from the standpoint of the story grammar to a sample of children and adults in Liberia. Now, Liberia is a country in northern Africa in which formal education is not required, and as the consequences, the participants varied in their degree of literacy and education. Their results were seen. The results for these groups, as well as comparable with the US group, show there is a substantial degree of similarity in the recall pattern. All groups recalled settings, beginnings, attempts, and outcomes better than reaction and ending. And children, both cultures show lower level of recall, but the patterns are similar. These results suggest that a story grammar of a type described by Mandler and other could be universal schema rather than one that is specific to our culture. This does not mean that no cultural differences exist in story schemata, only that certain schemata are culturally invariant. So the results with the US group and the groups in Liberia, their results, they both recalled settings, beginnings, attempts, and outcomes better than reaction and endings. And this shows that the difference in the culture, although it exists, but certain schemata are culturally invariant. Studies of comprehension and recall of stories provide support for the specific type of schema with regard to story grammar. We tend to store the episodes of a story in separate chunks in memory, and we use the ends of episodes as cues to summarize the episodes as a whole.